I showed up with a gift at the luxury party for my husband's company, a company funded entirely by me, only to find him down on one knee, proposing to his new chief operating officer, my best friend. "Will you leave my pathetic, cold wife and marry me?" he asked. The room erupted in laughter. Then she said yes. So I turned around, quietly walked away, canceled every payment, party, and luxury trip, and prepared to reveal my 90% ownership of the $357 million company. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Before we dive in, I'd love to know what city you're listening from. Feel free to share in the comments. Now, let's get into it. You know that heavy, static-charged silence right before a tornado hits? The kind that makes the hair on your arms stand up. That is exactly what I felt the moment my heels clicked against the marble floor of the Grand Meridian Ballroom. I had checked the invitation 3 times before leaving. Nexus Innovations Annual Gala. 7 p.m. sharp. I arrived right on time, wearing a navy silk suit that cost more than my first car. Yet, I felt like an uninvited guest at my own funeral. I stood at the entrance, clutching a small velvet gift box so tightly my knuckles turned white. Inside was a vintage 1958 Patek Philippe watch, a masterpiece of understated, timeless engineering. It was the exact kind of piece my husband, Russell, always claimed to admire but could never bring himself to buy. It had taken me months to track it down through a private dealer in Switzerland. It was supposed to be a surprise to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary, which happened to fall on the company's biggest night of the year. The ballroom was the picture of excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, scattering light like frozen fireworks. Tables were topped with towering arrangements of white orchids and hydrangeas. I knew exactly how much they cost, $600 per table, because I was the one who approved the budget. The air was thick with expensive perfume, prime rib, and that distinct, metallic scent of old money mixing with new ambition. I took a deep breath and walked further into the hall. I should have felt proud. This was my company. Well, on paper and to the world, it was Russell's. He was the face, the charm, the CEO who gave the keynote speeches. But I was the foundation. While Russell was out playing golf, I was the one writing the original code in our cramped apartment. When no bank would look at us, I was the one who funded the startup with my grandmother's inheritance. I was the invisible architect. But tonight, the atmosphere felt entirely hostile. As I moved through the crowd, I noticed a shift. Conversations didn't just drift off, they stopped instantly. People I had known for a decade, board members' wives I had hosted for brunch, investors I sent holiday cards to, looked at my face and immediately glanced down at their shoes, or suddenly found something fascinating on the ceiling. Meredith. I turned to see Sheila, the wife of our chief financial officer. She looked like she had seen a ghost, her hand flying to her throat to clutch her pearl necklace. "Hi, Sheila," I said, forcing a smile that felt tight on my face. "Lovely dress. Is Russell around? I wanted to give him this before his speech." Sheila's eyes darted toward the stage at the far end of the room, then back to me. Her expression wasn't unkind. It was pity, pure, unfiltered pity. Seeing that look on a peer's face is a terrible thing. It makes you feel incredibly small. "Oh, honey," she whispered, taking a half step back. You don't know, you shouldn't be here." My heart sank. "Know what? What do you mean?" "Maybe you should go back to your car," she stammered. "Seriously, Meredith, just leave." I ignored her. A cold dread began to spread through my chest, a physical chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I pushed past her and kept walking. The crowd grew thicker, forming a wall of tuxedos and gowns, everyone facing the stage. Then came the laughter. It wasn't polite applause or appreciative chuckles. It was a roar. The kind of loud, doubling-over amusement built entirely at someone else's expense. It was cruel. I squeezed past a group of junior developers holding up their phones to record. Before I saw the scene with my own eyes, I saw it on their screens. Across a dozen iPhones, I saw my husband. I broke through the final crowd, and there he was. Russell, my husband of 15 years, the man I had built a life with. He stood in the spotlight on stage, looking handsomer and more energetic than he had in years. and he was down on one knee. My first thought, a desperate, ridiculous attempt by my brain to protect itself, was that he had dropped something. A cufflink, perhaps, but he wasn't looking at the floor. He was looking up. He held a microphone in one hand and a ring box in the other. An open ring box displaying a diamond that looked like a chunk of ice, easily 5 carats. He was looking up at her. Vanessa, my best friend. The woman I met 20 years ago in a business ethics class. The one I hired as our director of operations when she was broke and desperate. For the last 10 years, she had been at my house every Friday night, drinking my wine, crying on my shoulder about her terrible breakups while I comforted her. She stood there in a shimmering gold gown that clung to every curve. I felt a sudden wave of nausea as I recognized it as a piece from a rising designer collection I had pointed out just last week. She looked triumphant, like a queen receiving tribute. Russell's voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, incredibly loud and clear. "Vanessa," he began, his voice carrying an intensity I hadn't heard directed at me since our wedding day. "You are the soul of this company. You are the fire in my life." I froze. The gift box in my hand suddenly felt incredibly heavy. "I am tired of living a half-life," Russell continued, playing to the crowd. He turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping the room. He didn't see me lingering in the shadows, but he was performing for everyone. "I am ready to stop pretending." He took a deep breath and delivered the words that ended my life as I knew it. "Will you leave my pathetic, cold wife and marry me?" The room erupted. Before I tell you what I did next, and trust me, you'll want to hear this because I didn't scream and I didn't faint, I want to take a quick moment to welcome you. If you are listening to my story, please let me know in the comments what city or state you're tuning in from. It makes me feel a little less alone in this. Go ahead, type it in. I'll wait. All right, ready, because what happened next was the beginning of their end. "Will you leave my pathetic, cold wife and marry me?" The words hung in the air, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Cold, pathetic. The laughter that followed was a physical blow. A wave of humiliation that washed over me, numbing the rational part of my brain. I looked around. People I hired, people paying mortgages with paychecks I signed, were laughing. Some were even cheering. It felt like watching a public execution where the crowd cheered for the executioner's axe. I looked at Vanessa. In that split second, I still, perhaps foolishly, expected to see a flicker of hesitation. I expected my best friend of 20 years to look shocked, to slap him, to say, "Russell, are you crazy? Meredith is my friend." But she didn't. Vanessa threw her head back and laughed. It was a bright, musical sound, caught perfectly by the microphone. Then she looked down at him, her eyes shining with tears that looked perfectly rehearsed. She pressed a hand to her chest in mock surprise, even though her dress perfectly matched the style of the ring. "Yes," she shrieked into his microphone. "Yes, Russell, finally." The crowd went wild. Champagne corks popped. The band struck up a celebratory, upbeat romantic tune. Russell stood, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. It wasn't a quick kiss. It was deep, passionate, and theatrical, the kind you see at the end of a romantic comedy. He dipped her back, and the crowd cheered louder. I stood there, a ghost in the corner of the room. My heart pounded so hard against my ribs I thought they might crack. The edges of my vision began to blur. Every instinct in my body screamed for a reaction. A primal part of me wanted to storm that stage, to tear the smug smile off Vanessa's face, to throw the heavy Patek Philippe box at Russell's perfectly styled head. I wanted to grab the microphone and scream until my throat bled, telling everyone that the pathetic wife was the actual owner of 90% of the company they stood in. I took a step forward, my hands trembling. But then I stopped. I remembered something my father told me when he taught me to play chess. "Meredith," he would say, "never interrupt your opponent when they are making a mistake. When they expose their neck, don't just scratch it. Wait until you can take the king." Russell hadn't just exposed his neck. He had exposed his entire flank. He was drunk on his own ego, riding the adrenaline of public adoration. He thought he was untouchable. He assumed I was sitting at home, the quiet wife waiting by the phone. He had no idea I was even there. and Vanessa was basking in her triumph. She had won. In her mind, she had finally taken the one thing I had that she couldn't replicate: my husband, my status, my life. If I made a scene now, I would just be the crazy ex-wife. I would be the hysterical, emotional woman. I would be their entertainment. They would record videos of me screaming, and those clips would live on the internet forever. I would give them exactly what they wanted: a reaction. No, I took a deep breath. The air tasted like betrayal and expensive champagne. I took one last look at the happy couple. I memorized the way Russell's hand rested on the small of her back, the same gesture he used to use with me. I memorized the desperate hunger for validation in Vanessa's eyes as she looked at the crowd. I tightened my grip on the gift box until the sharp corners dug into my palm, keeping me grounded. I turned around. Meredith. It was Sheila again, the CFO's wife. She was still near the entrance, watching me with wide, terrified eyes. She probably expected me to make a scene or collapse. Are you okay? I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman had eaten at my dinner table. She knew, they all knew. How long had they kept this from me? Months, years, had they laughed behind my back while I stayed up late approving their budgets. I'm fine, Sheila, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant, but perfectly steady. Enjoy the party. I hear the cake was very expensive. I didn't wait for her to reply. I turned on my heel, spine straight, chin up. I walked out of that ballroom with the same quiet dignity I had walked in with. I passed the security guards, who nodded to me, entirely unaware that my life had just been shattered. I passed the coat check, pushed through the heavy revolving doors, and stepped into the cool, damp night air. The noise of the party faded instantly, replaced by the hum of city traffic and a distant siren. My hands began to shake uncontrollably, a tremor running from my fingers to my shoulders. I leaned against a concrete pillar, taking deep, ragged breaths. Hot tears threatened to spill over. No, I whispered to myself. Not yet, you don't get to cry yet. I pulled out my phone. My lock screen was a photo of Russell and me on a trip to Napa Valley 3 years ago. We looked happy. Looking at his smiling face made me feel a wave of physical sickness. I swiped past it and opened Uber, my fingers flying across the glass screen. Destination, home. But it wasn't home anymore. It was just a crime scene where I kept my clothes. The Uber arrived 3 minutes later, a sleek, nondescript black sedan. I slid into the back seat, the cool leather soothing against my skin. The car smelled like vanilla air freshener and faint coffee. It was a mundane, comforting scent compared to the suffocating smell of lilies and deceit I had just left behind. Rough night, the driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. He was an older man, maybe 60, with kind eyes and gray hair under a flat cap. The app listed his name as Thomas. I looked out the window at the glittering facade of the Grand Meridian. Inside, they were probably cutting the cake. Russell was likely giving a toast, raising a glass of vintage Dom Perignon paid for by my dividends, celebrating his future with Vanessa. You have no idea, Thomas, I said quietly. Well, you're safe now, he said simply. I'll get you where you need to go. Safe, the word felt completely foreign. Was I safe? I had spent 15 years building a fortress of financial security, a marriage built on trust, and a friendship built on shared history. In just 5 minutes, I realized that fortress was made of paper, and I was holding the match. I looked down at the velvet box still gripped in my hand. The Patek Philippe, a beautiful object representing hours of exquisite craftsmanship. It represented the time I had invested in Russell, believing I was giving him something symbolic of forever. Now, it just looked like a bribe, a pathetic attempt to buy the affection of a man who was already with my best friend. Thomas, I asked, do you like watches? He chuckled, his eyes on the road. I use my phone, ma'am. Time is time, whether it's on a Rolex or a screen. Smart man. I rolled down the window. The wind rushed into the car, ruining the hair I had spent an hour styling. We were crossing the bridge, the dark river churning below. I reached my hand with the box out into the open air. Ma'am, Thomas asked, his voice laced with concern. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about the $50,000. I didn't think about how rare the piece was. I simply opened my fingers. The box tumbled into the darkness, swallowed instantly by the night and the river below. I pulled my hand back inside and rolled up the window. A strange feeling washed over me. I expected to feel regret. I expected panic. Instead, I felt lighter. $50,000 lighter. It was the first piece of dead weight thrown overboard. The ship was still sinking, but at least I was clearing the deck. Did you just? Thomas's voice trailed off. It was trash, I said. Just expensive trash. The rest of the ride passed in silence. I rested my head against the cool glass, watching the city lights blur past. I thought about our state's divorce laws. I thought about the corporate bylaws of Nexus Innovations. I thought about the biometric safe in my home office. When we pulled up to the curb of my building, the penthouse Russell had insisted on buying because it was a status address. I sat there for a moment. "Here we are, ma'am," Thomas said gently. I looked up at the building, a towering monument of glass and steel, looking incredibly cold and empty. "Thank you, Thomas," I said. I tipped him $100 on the app. It was the only act of kindness I had experienced all night, and I wanted to return it. I walked into the lobby. Patrick, the night doorman, smiled. "Good evening, Mrs. Monroe. Back early tonight. Mr. Monroe isn't with you." "Mr. Monroe was detained," I said, my voice completely flat. "He has a big announcement tonight." "Oh, that's wonderful. He works so hard." "Yes," I said, stepping into the elevator. "He certainly has been busy." The elevator ride to the 45th floor took only 20 seconds. 20 seconds of watching the numbers climb, 20 seconds to steel myself. When the doors opened directly into our foyer, the silence of the penthouse hit me. Usually, it felt peaceful. Tonight, it felt like a tomb. I kicked off my heels, leaving them right in the middle of the hallway. I walked into the kitchen, my stockinged feet cold against the marble floor. I didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows provided more than enough light. I went straight to the bar cart. Passing past the wine, I reached for a bottle of whiskey, the single malt Scotch Russell saved for special occasions. I poured myself a glass. Neat. I took a sip, letting the burn anchor me to the room. Then I walked into my office. Not the shared study where Russell played video games while pretending to work. My office. The small, soundproofed room at the back of the penthouse where the real work happened. I sat down in my chair and looked at the dual monitors, dark for now. The crying was over. The tears had dried in the Uber. Now there was only clarity. Cold, hard, black and white clarity. I built this company. I built this life. I created Russell. And now I was going to dismantle it all brick by brick, dollar by dollar. But first, I had to understand how I had been so blind. I had to look at the data. I had to audit the source code of my own life to find the vulnerability. And the biggest vulnerability had a name: Vanessa. It is easy to see red flags in the rearview mirror. But when you are driving down the highway of life at 90 miles an hour, they just look like scenery. I met Vanessa during my sophomore year of college. I was the quiet girl in the front row of the lecture hall, taking meticulous notes with colored pens. Vanessa was the girl who swept in 10 minutes late, holding a Starbucks cup, looking effortlessly messy and beautiful. She had a laugh that made you want to be in on the joke, and a way of looking at you that made you feel chosen. She chose me. Or rather, she targeted me. "Hey," she had whispered during a midterm exam, her hair brushing against my arm. "What's the answer to number 4? I should have covered my paper. I should have ignored her. Instead, I slid my arm slightly to the left. That became the pattern of our interaction for the next 20 years. Vanessa had a need, and I filled it. She called it friendship. I see it now as parasitic. I remember our senior year. We were roommates in a drafty apartment off campus. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at the library, one tutoring, to pay my half of the rent. Vanessa didn't work. She said she was focusing on her art, which mostly involved sleeping until noon and dadding men with motorcycles. One night, I came home exhausted, carrying a bag of groceries I had carefully budgeted for. Vanessa was sitting on our second-hand sofa, crying. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting the bag down. My tuition, she sobbed. My dad didn't send the check. They're going to kick me out, Meredith. I won't get to graduate with you. My heart broke for her. The thought of graduating without my best friend seemed impossible. We were a team. Meredith and Vanessa, the brains and the beauty. How much is it? I asked. 2,000, she whispered. That was my entire savings. The money I had saved to put a down payment on a car so I wouldn't have to take the bus to my internship anymore. I'll lend it to you, I said. She stopped crying instantly. You will. Oh my God, Mer, you're a lifesaver. I swear I'll pay you back as soon as I sell my paintings. She never sold those paintings. She never paid me back. And when I bought a rusty Honda Civic 3 months later because it was all I could afford, she made fun of it. Oh, honey, she laughed, sitting in the passenger seat and putting her muddy boots on the dashboard. This car smells like old soup, but it suits you. You're just so practical. Practical, that was her favorite word for me. It was a backhanded compliment. It meant boring. It meant safe. It meant I was the dirt and she was the flower. Fast forward 10 years, I was building Nexus. I was lonely, working 18-hour days. Vanessa was bouncing from job to job, marketing assistant, event planner, yoga instructor. One day, she showed up at my office looking desperate. I need a job, Mer, she said. Just something to get me back on my feet. I'm drowning. I hired her. I created a title for her, Director of Culture. It was a glorified role with a massive salary. I started her at $80,000 a year. You're the best, she squealed, hugging me. We're going to run the world together. But she didn't work. She gossiped. She planned happy hours. She flirted with the interns. And she constantly undermined me. I remember a meeting about 3 years ago. I had just presented a new strategic direction for our software. I was proud of it. It was complex and innovative. Vanessa raised her hand. Meredith, sweetie, that's all great, she said in front of the entire executive team, but it's a little dry. Nobody buys algorithms, they buy feelings. Maybe you should let Russell handle the vision part and you just focus on the coding. The room laughed. Russell laughed too. She's right, babe, Russell said, patting my hand. You're the engine, let us be the shiny paint. I felt humiliated and small, but I swallowed it. Why? Because I thought they loved me. I thought they were protecting me from my own social awkwardness. I was the ugly duckling paying for the pond so the swans could swim. I thought back to the way Vanessa looked at Russell at the party tonight. It wasn't new. It hit me like a physical blow. I had seen that look before, last Christmas at my house. Vanessa was wearing a red dress that was a little too short. She and Russell were in the kitchen mixing drinks while I was in the living room decorating the tree. I heard them laughing, a low, intimate sound. When I walked in, they stepped apart quickly. Spilled some vermouth, Vanessa said smoothly, her face slightly flushed. I believed her. I was so blind. I believed her because the alternative was unthinkable. Who betrays the person who pays their rent? Who steals the husband of the woman who has kept them employed for a decade? A snake, that was the answer. But here is the thing about snakes. They are cold-blooded. They only move when they are warm. And I had been keeping Vanessa warm for 20 years, providing heat, shelter, and food. Tonight, I decided to turn off the heat. I sat in my dark office, the whiskey burning in my stomach. I thought about Vanessa's corporate credit card, her business trips, the consulting fees I had approved for her department. I pulled a notepad toward me, wrote her name, and next to it wrote the word, evict. Not just from her apartment, which I knew she rented using her company's salary, but from my life and from my history. But the parasite wasn't the only issue. The host was the real problem, Russell, and his betrayal cut much deeper because he wasn't just my friend, he was my partner, or so I thought. If Vanessa was the parasite, Russell was the project. I met Russell a year after college. I was a junior back-end developer at a logistics company, hiding in my cubicle wearing oversized sweaters, coding while listening to audiobooks. Russell was in sales. He was my complete opposite, loud, charming, tall, with a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo. One day, he walked into the break room while I was making tea. "You're Meredith, right?" he asked, leaning against the vending machine. The genius who fixed the server crash last week. I blushed. No one's ever called me a genius. They usually just call me tech support. I was just doing my job, I mumbled. Well, you saved my commission check, he said, flashing that dazzling smile. Let me buy you lunch, real food, not vending machine cookies. By the time the appetizers arrived, I was in love. I loved how he listened to me talk about data structures without yawning. I loved how he made me feel seen. But looking back now, I wonder, did he see me or did he see my inheritance? My grandmother had passed away 6 months before I met Russell. She was a frugal, sharp woman who had invested wisely in the stock market since the 1950s. When she died, she left everything to me, $2 million. It was a secret. I didn't tell anyone at the company. I drove my rusty Honda. I lived in a cheap apartment. I was afraid people would treat me differently if they knew. But I told Russell. We had been dating for 6 months. It was a Sunday morning, and we were lying in bed. I have this idea for a company, I whispered. A new way to integrate cloud storage with AI sorting, but I need funding. Funding is hard to find, Russell sighed. Banks hate risk. I have the money, I said. I told him about the inheritance. I watched his eyes go wide. I watched his mind start working. Meredith, he said, grabbing my hands. This is it. This is our destiny. You have the brains, you have the money, I have the sales skills. We can build an empire. And we did. Or rather, I paid for it and he gave it a name. Nexus Innovations, he announced. It sounds powerful. When it came time to incorporate, I made the decision that would define the next 15 years of my life. I was terrified of public speaking. I hated conflict. The thought of pitching to investors made me hyperventilate. You be the CEO, I told Russell. You be the face. I'll take the CTO title. I'll stay in the background and keep the product running. You go out and sell it. Are you sure? He asked. But he didn't ask twice. He looked at the CEO nameplate on the desk and puffed out his chest. We went to a lawyer to draw up the paperwork, Mr. Henderson, an old friend of my grandmother's. From day one, he looked at Russell with suspicion. Meredith, Mr. Henderson said, looking over his glasses. If you are putting in 100% of the capital and doing 100% of the product development, you should retain the controlling interest. Of course, I said. I'll keep 90% of the shares. Russell will have 10% as a founding partner, but I want him to have voting power for daily operations. I don't want to be bogged down by administration. Mr. Henderson frowned, but he drew up the paperwork. However, he added a clause, one I barely remembered until tonight. Mr. Henderson called it the kill switch. What's this? Russell had asked, flipping through the 50-page document, clearly bored by the legalese. Standard boilerplate language, I lied, covering for Mr. Henderson. Just to protect the assets in case of a hostile takeover. Right, sounds good, Russell said, signing his name with a flourish. He didn't look. He never read anything longer than a tweet. That clause stated that while the CEO had operational control, as the majority shareholder, I retained super-administrative access over all financial and operational decisions. It also stated that any breach of fiduciary duty, including using corporate funds for personal matters, constituted an immediate breach of contract, triggering a clause that allowed the majority shareholder to freeze all assets and terminate the CEO without board approval. For 15 years, Russell played the king. He hired people. He did interviews with Forbes. He took the credit. I built this company in a garage, he would boast at parties. I would stand beside him, smiling, holding his drink. He works so hard, I would chime in. I gave him the glory because I thought we were partners. I thought his wins were my wins. I thought we were building a legacy for our future children. Children he always claimed we were too busy to have. Next year, babe, he would say. Once the IPO is done, once the merger settles. There were never going to be children. I realize that now. He didn't want a family with me. He just wanted an automated bank account. He was addicted to the lifestyle my code provided, the custom suits, the first-class flights, the country club memberships. Slowly, his respect for me eroded. "Meredith, don't bore the guests with tech talk," he would whisper at dinner parties. "Meredith, buy a new dress, you look like a librarian. Meredith, you're so cold, lighten up." Cold, there was that word again. I wasn't cold. I was exhausted. I was carrying the weight of a multi-million-dollar company while he played celebrity. I looked at the wedding photo on my desk. Russell looked triumphant, and I looked adoring. I picked up the frame, staring at his smile. It was the smile of a man who thought he had fooled the world. "You didn't build this, Russell," I whispered to the empty room. "You never wrote a single line of code. You didn't stay up until 4 a.m. debugging a kernel. You're just a mascot. And when a mascot starts getting in the way of the team, do you know what you do? You fire him." I placed the photo frame face down, turned to my computer, and nudged the mouse. The screen hummed to life, casting the familiar blue light of the Nexus operating system, my system, across the room. It was time to get to work. I poured myself another finger of whiskey. My hands were steady now. The shaking had been replaced by a cold, rhythmic tapping of my fingers against the mahogany desk. I logged into the Nexus mainframe. Normally, I logged in as CTO Evans. It gave me access to code, product roadmaps, and server status. Tonight, I didn't use that login. I typed in a username I hadn't used in 5 years. The password. I typed it in. A 30-character combination. My grandmother's birthday, the chemical formula for caffeine, and the coordinates of the cramped apartment where I wrote the very first lines of the Nexus source code. Access granted. The screen shifted. The interface transformed from the friendly employee portal blue to a stark, commanding red and black. This was the back end. God mode. I navigated straight to the financial oversight module. First, I wanted to see the extent of the damage. I pulled up the corporate credit card statements for Russell Monroe, CEO, and Vanessa Thorne, COO. I scrolled, and with every swipe, my jaw tightened. This wasn't just a few business dinners. The Ritz-Carlton, Maui, $12,000. The dates matched his tech conference in Seattle. Tiffany & Co., $45,000. The receipt for the ring. He had actually used the company card to buy her engagement ring. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. Porsche lease payments, $2,500 a month. Vanessa's car. Fertility clinic, Upper East Side. $11,500. I froze, staring at that last entry. A fertility clinic. I couldn't breathe. For 5 years, Russell had told me he wasn't ready for kids. "The company is our baby," he would say. He just wasn't ready to have them with me. A primal scream caught in my throat, but I forced it down. Anger is fire. If you let it out, it burns you. If you keep it locked inside, it becomes an engine. "All right," I whispered. "You want to play with company money? Let's see how you feel when the ATM swallows your card." I opened the emergency protocol folder. Inside was a file labeled Protocol is Age. It was a script I had written late one night 10 years ago, after a massive fight where Russell threatened to leave me if I kept questioning his spending. I wrote it as a safeguard, never truly believing I would have to use it. I double-clicked. A dialog box popped up. "Warning. This action will freeze all assets associated with the primary operating accounts of Nexus Innovations. All outward transfers will be halted. All corporate lines of credit will be suspended. Administrative override required to reverse. Proceed." I hovered the mouse over the yes button. I thought about the words pathetic, cold wife. I thought about the laughter. I thought about the fertility clinic bill. I clicked. Processing, protocol active, assets frozen. I wasn't done. I navigated to the travel management system and found their upcoming itinerary. Flight, New York to St. Bart's, first class. 2 passengers, Russell Monroe and Vanessa Thorne. Departure, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. They were heading out for an engagement honeymoon. I clicked cancel reservation. Reason for cancellation: fraudulent activity, refund routing to frozen corporate account. They wouldn't just be grounded, they would be completely stuck. Next, I logged into the HR portal and pulled up Vanessa's employee file. Status, active. Salary, $250,000 plus bonuses. I clicked edit. Status, suspended pending investigation. Building access, revoked. Corporate email, disabled. I did the exact same to Russell, but with him, I added a flag. Breach of fiduciary duty. This would automatically alert the board of directors that a formal internal audit had been triggered. Finally, I sent a command to the security system at our headquarters. Invalidate badges, R. Monroe v. Thorne. Tomorrow morning, when they tried to sweep into the office to show off their engagement, the light wouldn't turn green. It would turn red. I leaned back in my chair. It had taken me 12 minutes. In 12 minutes, I had cut off their funds, their travel, their jobs, and their access. I checked the time, 1 a.m. The party was probably wrapping up. They were likely heading to some suite also paid for by the company to celebrate. They would try to order room service or pop another bottle of champagne, and the card would decline. I could picture the scene, the confusion, telling the waiter to try it again, and the endless embarrassment. "Enjoy your night, Russell," I whispered. "It's the last one you'll ever have on my dime." I closed my laptop, but kept it running, letting it glow in the dark like a digital eye, watching over the destruction I had just unleashed. I stood up. I felt exhausted, but for the first time in years, my steps didn't feel heavy. I walked into the bedroom, took off the navy suit, and removed the diamond earrings Russell had given me 5 years ago, most likely paid for by the company, too. I tossed them into the bathroom trash. I washed my face, looking at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see a pathetic, cold wife. I saw a woman who had just woken up from a 20-year coma. I went to bed, and for the first time in a decade, I slept like a baby. I woke up naturally at 7 a.m. No alarm, just the sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a fraction of a second, I forgot. I reached out to the other side of the bed, expecting to feel Russell's warmth, but my hand met only cold, empty sheets. Then the memories of the ballroom flooded back. The laughter, the ring, the insults. But this time, I didn't feel pain. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Today was game day. I got out of bed, walked into the kitchen, and brewed coffee. Not the fancy espresso Russell insisted on, but the cheap, dark roast drip coffee I liked and he hated. The rich, bitter aroma filled the kitchen. I walked to the island where my phone had been charging, untouched since I got into the Uber last night. I tapped the screen. It lit up like a Christmas tree in downtown Manhattan. 157 missed calls, 84 text messages, 22 voicemails. I scrolled through the list. Russell, 42 calls. Russell in a different hour, 28 calls. Vanessa, 15 calls. Fraud alert texts from Amex and Chase. 12 missed calls from my mother-in-law, Evelyn Monroe. Ah, Evelyn, the woman who criticized my wedding dress, my cooking, and my inability to give her a grandchild. Of course she called. I took my phone, sat on a bar stool, and took a sip of coffee. I decided to listen to just one voicemail to test the waters. I tapped Russell's most recent message, time-stamped 6:45 a.m. "Meredith, answer the phone. What is going on?" "We're at the hotel and the cards are declined. They won't let us check out. I had to call my dad to wire money to the front desk. It was humiliating. And now I can't log into my email. Did you do something? If this is about last night, you're overreacting. It was a joke, Meredith, a performance. Call me back right now, or I swear to God." Click. "A joke," I said to the empty room. He actually tried to spin publicly proposing to his mistress as a joke. The level of delusion was stunning. I checked Vanessa's texts. 2 a.m. Please answer. There's been a mistake." 2:15 a.m. My Uber won't work. It says invalid payment. Did you shut off the company cards? That is illegal, Meredith. That is my compensation. 3 a.m. You are being incredibly vindictive. We need to talk right now. I smiled, a genuine sharp smile. Right then, my phone rang again. The caller ID flashed, Evelyn Monroe. I hesitated, then swiped to answer. "Hello, Evelyn." "Meredith," her voice shrieked. "What have you done? Russell just called me from the airport. He says they won't print their tickets. He says you cut off his funds." "I didn't cut off his funds, Evelyn," I said calmly, taking a sip of coffee. I froze the company's assets. There's a difference. If Russell has his own money, he's welcome to spend it. His own money. All of it is his money. He is the CEO. He was the CEO, I corrected. As of 1 a.m. last night, he is under investigation for misappropriation of company funds. Misappropriation, she gasped. How dare you? After everything he's done for you, you ungrateful little. He made you. He gave you this life. And just because you're jealous of a little friendship with Vanessa, he proposed to her. Evelyn, it was on a stage, while calling me pathetic. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Evelyn scoffed. Men have needs. If you were a better wife, he wouldn't have looked elsewhere. You should be apologizing to him. You should be begging him to come back. Instead, you're acting like a vengeful child, leaving him stranded at an airport. Are you finished? I asked. No, I am not. Fix this, Meredith, right now, or I am coming over there myself. And… Evelyn, I interrupted, dropping my voice an octave. That credit card you use for your weekly bridge club lunches, the one Russell gave you. Silence on the other end. It's a corporate card, Evelyn. It's in the audit. Every Cobb salad, every glass of Chardonnay, all flagged as fraud. Next week when you go play cards, you might want to bring cash. I hung up. I blocked her number. Then I blocked Russell. Then I blocked Vanessa. The silence that followed was beautiful. I wasn't running from them. I was preparing. I knew they would come for me. They had to, because I held the keys to the kingdom. The intercom buzzed. I looked at the monitor. It was the doorman. Mrs. Monroe, there's a Mr. Jard Stevens here to see you. He says he works for Russell. He looks like he's about to faint. Jard, Russell's executive assistant. A good kid fresh out of business school with heavy student loans. He did all of Russell's actual work while Russell played golf. Send him up, Patrick, I said. I tightened the belt of my silk robe. The first wave of the tsunami was about to hit. Jard looked like he had run all the way from the office. His tie was crooked, his hair was a mess, and he clutched a briefcase like a shield. Despite the cool morning, he was sweating. I opened the door. Mrs. Monroe, oh thank goodness, he gasped, practically stumbling into the foyer. I didn't know where else to go. Russell isn't answering. Vanessa isn't answering. The office. It's on fire, metaphorically, and maybe literally soon. Deep breath, Jard, I said, gesturing toward the living room. Come in. Would you like some coffee? He looked at me as if I had just handed him a grenade. Coffee, Mrs. Monroe, the systems are down, everything. Payroll was supposed to go out at 9 a.m., but it failed. The London team can't log in. The server room is locked, physically locked. The keycards aren't working, and… He swallowed hard. And there's a message on the main admin panel. It just says audit in progress. Everyone is panicking. Is the company going under? Did the feds raid us? I walked over to the coffee pot and poured him a cup, handing it to him. His hand shook so badly the liquid sloshed over the rim. The company isn't going under, Jard, I said quietly. It's restructuring. Restructuring by who? Russell is stuck at JFK. He texted me, absolutely furious, saying there's a technical glitch and telling me to find you because you crashed the network. I didn't crash it, I said, sitting across from him. I fixed it. Jard blinked. He was a smart kid, but he had spent 2 years buying into the myth of Russell Monroe. He thought Russell was the genius, and I was just the wife who showed up at holiday parties. I don't understand, he whispered. Jard, I said, who signs your paychecks? Nexus Innovations. And who owns Nexus Innovations? Well, Russell, Mr. Monroe, he founded it. No, I said softly. He didn't, I did. I watched the confusion wash over his face. I wrote the code, Jard. I own 90% of the shares. Russell owns 10. And last night, Russell breached his contract by attempting to use company funds to fly his mistress, your boss, Vanessa, to St. Bart's. Jard's jaw dropped. Mistress, Vanessa, you didn't know I mean they spent a lot of time together, but… His voice trailed off, his face turning bright red. He knew, of course he knew. He had probably booked the hotel rooms. It's okay, Jard. You were just doing your job, but now your job is changing. I stood up and walked to the console table, picking up a thick manila envelope I had prepared before he arrived. "This isn't a technical glitch," I said, handing it to him. "It's a takeover by the owner." Jard took the envelope. It was heavy. "What is this?" "It's for Russell. Since he's stuck at the airport, I assume he'll head here next, or to Vanessa's apartment. I need you to hand-deliver this to him." "What do I tell him?" "Tell him there are no bugs in the system. Tell him the system is working perfectly, exactly as designed. And tell him that sometimes, when you burn a bridge, you find out too late that you're standing on the wrong side of the river." Jard stared at me, looking a mixture of terrified and awestruck. "Mrs. Monroe," he asked hesitantly, "what about payroll? The developers have rent to pay." "I know," I said. "I've already set a manual override for standard employee payroll. It will be processed by noon. But executive payroll, completely frozen. Russell and Vanessa aren't getting paid today, and they never will again." Jard nodded slowly. He stood up, clutching the envelope tightly. I should go find him." "Yes, you should. And Jard." "Yes, ma'am." "Update your resume. I'm going to need a new director of operations to replace Vanessa. If you handle this delivery correctly, you might find yourself on the short list." His eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." He turned and walked out, his posture significantly straighter than when he had arrived. I watched him go. The pawn had been moved. The king was about to receive his checkmate notice. I sat back down. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. It wouldn't take long. A cut-off narcissist is a dangerous thing, and Russell was about to realize he was starving. I picked up my book. I had a few hours before the real confrontation began, and I intended to enjoy them. The envelope Jard carried out of the apartment felt like a bomb I had just primed. But while the fuse on that explosive was burning, I had to prepare my fallout shelter. Sitting alone in the living room, surrounded by the quiet that used to make me feel lonely, I felt protected. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years, but knew by heart. "Henderson Law Offices." A gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Hello, Arthur," I said. "It's Meredith Evans, not Monroe, Evans." Arthur Henderson had been my grandmother's lawyer. He was 80 years old, sharp as a razor, and the only person besides me who knew the true ownership structure of Nexus Innovations. He despised Russell. He had refused to attend our wedding, sending only a card that read, "Keep your prenup in a fireproof safe." "Meredith," he said, his tone shifting from professional to alert. "I've been waiting 15 years for this call. Is it time?" "It's time," I said. "He crossed the line, Arthur. Personal travel on corporate funds, systemic embezzlement, and public humiliation." "I saw the video," Arthur grunted. "Trending on Twitter. CEO proposes to COO in front of wife. I assume you're the wife in the title." "That's me, which is perfect. That video is worth its weight in gold in court. It proves intent to humiliate, alienation of affection, and documents their relationship on camera while he is still married to me. It completely destroys any "we were just friends" defense. What's your play?" "I want scorched earth," I said. Arthur let out a low whistle. "Are you sure? There won't be anything left." "I'm sure. I'm sending you the draft terms now. I need you to make them legally airtight by noon." I spent the next 2 hours expanding the document that was currently in the envelope Jard was delivering, turning it into a formal legal onslaught. I didn't just want Russell out. I wanted him erased. The terms were brutal. They were designed to be. First, immediate resignation. Russell Monroe would resign from his role as CEO, effective immediately. No golden parachute, no severance, no advisory role. He would walk away with nothing but the clothes on his back. Second, termination of Vanessa Thorne. Fired immediately for cause, gross misconduct, embezzlement, and creating a hostile work environment. She would be barred from the premises and legally prohibited from contacting any Nexus employee or client. Third, restitution. This was the heaviest blow. I calculated the unauthorized spending over the last 5 years, the dinners, the trips, the gifts, the lease on Vanessa's Porsche, the apartment she lived in under the guise of a satellite office. It totaled $3.8 million. Russell had to agree to repay this personally or face criminal charges for corporate theft. Since I knew he didn't have $3.8 million, it effectively meant I would seize his personal assets, his car, his watch collection, and his half of our vacation home. Fourth, non-disclosure and non-compete agreements. They would be barred from working in the tech sector for 5 years and prohibited from speaking about Nexus, me, or their time at the company. No tell-all books, no interviews, only silence. Fifth, public acknowledgement. Russell had to sign a statement admitting that Meredith Evans was the sole founder and creator of the Nexus algorithm, acknowledging his role was purely promotional. I stared at the document on my screen. It looked like a weapon. My phone buzzed, a text from Jard. Delivered, he's at Vanessa's apartment, he's reading it now. I closed my eyes and pictured it. Russell, sweating and panicked, sitting on Vanessa's beige velvet couch paid for with my money, reading the words that ended his career as a fake king. I waited. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It wasn't Russell. It was an unrecognized number. Meredith here. Meredith, it's George from the board. George Abernathy, the board chairman, a man who always patted me on the head, called me Russell's lovely helper and ignored my input in meetings. Hello, George. Meredith, we have a situation. George sounded out of breath. We received bank notifications, SEC alerts about an internal audit, and Russell isn't answering. We're hearing rumors of an affair. They aren't rumors, George, I said coldly. It was live-streamed last night. Did you miss the proposal? I thought that was a skit for the gala. It wasn't a skit. Russell is attempting to use company funds to finance his new life with Vanessa. I froze the accounts to protect shareholder value. You're welcome. You froze the accounts. Meredith, you can't do that. You're just you're a shareholder, but you're not an executive. Actually, George, if you review the corporate bylaws, specifically Section 9, Paragraph C, you'll find that as the 90% majority stakeholder, I have emergency powers in the event of executive malfeasance. I am exercising those powers now. Silence on the line. I could hear him rustling papers. 90%, he whispered. I thought. Russell always said it was 50-50. Russell lied, I said. About a lot of things. I suggest you call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I will be there to accept Russell's resignation and present the forensic audit of his theft. If the board stands by him, I will be forced to sue every single one of you for neglecting your fiduciary duty. Have I made myself clear? George stammered. Yes, tomorrow, 9 a.m. I hung up and walked to the window. The city looked different today, clearer, the fog gone. I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for my name. For 15 years, I had been the ghost in my own machine. Tomorrow, I was going to materialize. But before tomorrow, I had to survive tonight. And I knew the snake would try to bite one last time before it went down. The intercom buzzed again. Mrs. Monroe, Patrick the doorman sounded nervous. Ms. Thorne is here. She's demanding to come up. She says she lives there. She doesn't live here, Patrick, I said. But send her up. It's time to take out the trash. I left the door unlocked. I wanted her to walk in, wanting her to feel powerful for one last moment before I stripped it all away. The door burst open. Vanessa didn't walk in, she stormed. She looked like a wreck, but a glamorous one. Her designer jeans were tight, her hair was in a messy bun that probably took an hour to perfect, and she wore sunglasses indoors. As she entered the living room, she ripped them off, her eyes burning with self-righteous privilege. You crazy lunatic, she screamed, throwing her Louis Vuitton bag onto my couch. What is wrong with you? You canceled my cards. You locked me out of the system. Do you have any idea who I am? I was sitting in the armchair, sipping tea. I didn't stand up and I didn't blink. Hello, Vanessa, I said. I see you didn't make it to St. Bart's. Don't play games with me, Meredith. She strode over, pointing a manicured finger in my face. You ruined everything. Russell is having a panic attack in my living room because of you. We were supposed to be celebrating. Celebrating what? I asked calmly. sleeping with my husband or stealing my money. I didn't steal anything. That money was earned. I am the COO of this company. I built the brand. You planned a few parties, Vanessa, I said. And you slept with the CEO. That's not an executive skill set. That's the oldest profession in the world. Her face turned a blotchy, angry red. How dare you? You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me. Since college, I was the one everyone wanted. I was the one who sparkled. You were just a wallet, a boring, average wallet. There it was, the truth she had hidden for 20 years. Is that what you thought? I asked. That I was just a wallet. Yes, she laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Why else would Russell be with you? Look at yourself, Meredith. You wear oversized sweaters. You read programming books for fun. You don't have a sensual bone in your body. Russell needed a presentable wife while he built an empire. Now that he's succeeded, he doesn't need the prop. He needs a partner, someone who matches his shine, me. At that, I stood up, slowly. He didn't build an empire, Vanessa, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And neither did you. I walked to the coffee table and picked up a folder, tossing it at her. It slid across the polished wood and stopped at her feet. What's this? She sneered. Open it. She hesitated, then bent down and flipped it open. It's a forensic audit of your spending, I said. Page 1, the lease on the Porsche. Page 2, your rent listed as Satellite Office A. Page 3, your niece's private school tuition listed as consulting fees. Page 4, the $50,000 you wired to your mother listed as a charitable donation. Her hands began to shake. Russell approved all of this, she stammered. Russell didn't have the authority to approve theft, I said. And since I, as the majority shareholder, never approved these expenses, it's embezzlement. Grand larceny. In the state of New York, given the amount is over $1 million, you are looking at up to 25 years in prison, Vanessa. She dropped the folder. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. Prison, she whispered. I've already sent a copy to the district attorney, I lied. I hadn't yet, but she didn't know that. And another copy to the IRS. You see, you didn't pay taxes on any of this income. That's tax evasion. Meredith, wait, she said, her voice shifting instantly. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the pleading, pathetic tone I remembered from college. Please, we're friends, best friends. You can't send me to prison. I didn't know. Russell told me it was fine. He manipulated me. I'm a victim, too. It was sickening. 5 minutes ago, she was a queen worthy of a crown. Now she was a victim. You are not a victim, Vanessa, I said, stepping closer to her, invading her personal space. You are a parasite. I let you feed on me because I was lonely. But I am not lonely anymore. I'm just angry. I can fix this, she cried, reaching out to grab my hand. I pulled back as if she were radioactive. I'll break up with him, I swear. I'll tell the board it was all his idea. I'll testify against him. Please don't send me to prison. Please, for the sake of the good old times. The good old times, I smiled. Do you mean when I did your homework, when I paid your rent, or when you slept with my husband in my house? She flinched. Get out, I said. Meredith. Get out, I screamed. It was the first time I had raised my voice. It echoed off the walls, harsh and terrifying. Get out of my house. Get out of my company. Get out of my life. If I ever see you again, I won't call the police. I will ruin you so thoroughly you won't be able to get a job cleaning toilets in this city. She scrambled backward, grabbing her bag. She gave me one last look, her eyes wide with terror, and then she ran. I heard the front door slam shut. I stood there shaking, my heart hammering in my chest. I walked to the door and locked it, resting my forehead against the cool wood. One down, one to go. Russell didn't storm in. He didn't have keys anymore. I had remotely changed the digital lock through the app an hour ago. He knocked. A soft, hesitant knock. The knock of a man who knew he was on the outside, on the wrong side in every sense of the word. It was 11:30 p.m. I opened the door. He looked pathetic. His tuxedo shirt was unbuttoned, his tie was gone, and he smelled of stale scotch and fear. His eyes were red. The arrogance from the stage, the CEO charisma, all of it was gone. He looked like a deflated balloon. Meredith, he croaked. Come in, Russell, I said, stepping aside. He walked into the living room, looking around as if he had never seen it before. He looked at the empty space on the mantelpiece where our wedding photo used to be. He looked at the packed boxes by the door, his boxes. You packed my things, he said, his voice trembling. I packed what you bought with your own money, I said. It's a very small pile. He collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands and crying. It was a loud, wet, ugly sound. I ruined everything, he sobbed. I don't know what happened. It was like a fever dream. Vanessa, she got into my head. She made me feel like a superhero. She said you didn't appreciate me. She said you held me back. I stood by the window, watching him crumble. And you believed her? I asked. I was weak. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. I'm a man, Meredith. I have needs. You were always working, always coding. I felt lonely. I was working to pay for the Ferrari you drove to her apartment, I said coldly. I know I messed up. He stood up, attempting to walk toward me. I held up a hand and he stopped. But we can fix this, Rosie. Please think about us. Remember when we started? We were a team, you and me against the world. Rosie, he hadn't called me that in 10 years. It was a cheap play. There is no us, Russell. There is only a plaintiff and a defendant. His face hardened slightly. The sadness flickered, replaced by a flash of desperate leverage. You can't destroy me, Meredith. The company needs me. I'm the face. If I leave, the stock will plummet. The investors love me. The investors love profit, I said. And once I show them the data on how you lost them $3.8 million in theft, they will love seeing you in handcuffs even more. You wouldn't do that, he whispered. I'm your husband. You stopped being my husband the moment you live-streamed a proposal to another woman. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair. He was cornered, and a cornered animal bites. Fine, he said, his voice shifting. It became lower, meaner. Fine, you want to play dirty? Let's play. I have leverage too, Meredith. Oh, really? Like what? That I work too hard? That I donate to charity? The video, he said. The proposal video. I have the raw file, the high-definition version. If you fire me, if you ruin me, I'll release the full cut. The one where the camera pans to you walking away. You look pathetic, Meredith, running away like a coward. People will laugh at you. You'll be the laughingstock of Silicon Valley. Is that what you want? I stared at him. He was actually trying to blackmail me with the moment of his own betrayal. It was so absurd. The sheer narcissism of it made me want to laugh. You think I care about a video? I asked. I know you do, he sneered, regaining some confidence. You hate attention. You hate being looked at. If that video goes viral, truly viral, you'll never be able to show your face again. I'll spin it. I'll tell everyone we had an open marriage and you're just jealous because I chose her over you. I'll ruin your reputation. I pulled out my phone. You mean this video? I asked, opening my photo library. I had downloaded the live stream earlier. I pressed play. We watched the tiny figures on the screen, him on his knee, me walking away. Exactly, he said. That's the one. Russell, I said. I own the copyright to that live stream. It was shot at a Nexus event on Nexus equipment. If you distribute it, I will sue you for copyright infringement in addition to embezzlement. But I didn't stop there. And just so you understand how little leverage you have, I pressed the trash can icon. Delete. Then I went to the recently deleted folder. Delete all. I held up the blank screen. I don't need to hide the truth, Russell. The truth is my weapon. You think people will laugh at me, maybe for a day, but do you know what they'll remember? I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. They'll remember that I fired you. They'll remember that I kept the millions. They'll remember that you are a broke, middle-aged fraud who lost the goose that laid the golden eggs because of your own greed. He stared at the phone, then at me. The fight left him entirely. He slumped back onto the couch. Please, he whispered. I have nothing. Vanessa threw me out. She said I was a bad investment. My cards are frozen. I can't even get a hotel room. Don't do this, Rosie. I looked at the man I had loved for 15 years. I searched inside myself for a single spark of compassion. I searched, but I found only ashes. Sign the paperwork, Russell, I said, pointing to the envelope on the desk. Sign it now, and I won't call the police tonight. You can sleep in the guest room for one night, and one night only, and you will be gone by dawn. If you don't sign, I will call the NYPD right now and report a $3.8 million theft. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me with a trembling hand. He reached into his pocket for a pen. He didn't have his expensive Mont Blanc anymore. He pulled out a cheap plastic ballpoint pen. He signed. I took the document. I checked the signature. It was done. The guest room is at the end of the hall, I said. Don't touch anything. The cameras are watching. I walked to the front door, opening it just to feel the fresh air. I needed to breathe. I shut the door firmly and locked it, leaning my back against the heavy wood. I could hear him weeping softly down the hall, but it sounded distant, like it was coming from another universe. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, and I closed my eyes. My body felt heavy, exhausted, but incredibly, wonderfully free. The parasite was gone. The weight was lifted. If you're still listening, if you've stayed with me through the betrayal, the heartbreak, and this long, dark night of the soul, please do me a huge favor. Click that like button and comment the number 1 below. Let me know you're out there. Let me know I'm not crazy for doing this. Your support is the only spine I have to stand on right now. Comment 1 if you're ready to see what happens when the sun rises and I walk into that boardroom to reclaim my throne. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, listening to the quiet of the apartment, knowing Russell was in the guest room at the end of the hall. It was a strange twilight zone, married yet apart, separated by worlds. At 5 a.m., I heard the front door click shut. He was gone. He took his 2 boxes and left before sunrise, just as I had commanded. I got up and walked to the window, watching a taxi pull away from the curb below. That was it. 15 years of marriage, driving away in a yellow cab. I checked my phone. The internet, however, never sleeps. The story had gone viral. The proposal video was on Reddit, Twitter, and TikTok, but something unexpected was happening. Russell had threatened that people would laugh at me, and some did. There were nasty comments calling me the stupid wife or making fun of my suit, but the narrative was shifting. A TikTok video by a user named TechGirl99 went viral. She was a former intern at Nexus. In the video, she was practically shouting, "You guys are laughing at her. Do you know who she is? She is Meredith Evans. She wrote the Nexus code. Russell is just an empty suit. I interned there for a summer. Russell couldn't open a PDF without help. Meredith was the one who fixed a server crash at 3 a.m. in her pajamas. She is the genius. He is the clown. Team Meredith, the hashtag was trending." I scrolled through the comments. Wait, she owns the company. Walking away was a power move. He proposed to the COO with company money. That is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Queen behavior. The silence was deafening. Then I saw a post from my mother-in-law, Evelyn. Unsurprisingly, she had posted a long, rambling Facebook status. "My poor son is being persecuted by a vindictive woman who controls the purse strings. Meredith was always jealous of his success. Prayers for Russell." But the comments below weren't the prayer circle she expected. "Evelyn, didn't your son cheat on her publicly? Sit this one out. Jealous of his success. Lady, she bought you your house." I felt a lump form in my throat. I had spent years believing I was invisible. I thought no one noticed the work I did. I thought I was just a fixture of the office, but people had noticed. The interns, the developers, the quiet people in the back of the room, they saw me. My inbox was flooded, not with spam, but with messages from employees. Subject, standing with you. "Mrs. Monroe or Ms. Evans, I just wanted to say the engineering team has your back. We know who built this place. Don't let him take it. Dave, senior developer." Subject, thank you. "When Russell wanted to deny my maternity leave, you were the one who approved it. I haven't forgotten. We are waiting for you to come back. Sarah, HR." I started to cry, not the ugly, desperate tears of last night. These were tears of relief, tears of validation. I wasn't alone. I had an army. I just hadn't realized it because I was too busy looking at the general who was betraying me. I wiped my eyes. It was 7 a.m. The board meeting was at 9. I walked to my closet. For years, I had worn clothes that blended into the background, beige, navy, gray, practical shoes. Don't attract attention. "Meredith," Russell would say, You look so dowdy today. But I didn't want to blend into the background anymore. I pushed the gray suits aside. I reached to the very back of the closet and pulled out a garment bag I had bought on a whim in Paris 5 years ago but had never worn. It was a white suit, sharp, tailored, and structured. It looked like something a movie villain would wear, or a hero, depending on your perspective. I put it on. It fit perfectly. I looked in the mirror. The white fabric made me look radiant, not pale. I put on a pair of red stilettos. The shoes Russell had said were too aggressive. I put on red lipstick. I wasn't going to the office to apologize. I wasn't going to explain. I was going to conquer. I grabbed my briefcase. Inside was the signed resignation, the forensic audit, and the termination papers for Vanessa. I walked out of the penthouse. Patrick, the doorman, did a double take when he saw me. Mrs. Monroe, wow, you look. Ms. Evans, Patrick, I smiled. Call me Ms. Evans from now on, and thank you. I stepped onto the street. The air was crisp, the city alive. I hailed a cab. I didn't call an Uber. I wanted to feel the chaotic energy of the city. Where to, lady? The driver asked. Nexus Tower, I said. Step on it, I have a company to reclaim. The lobby of Nexus Tower was buzzing. The morning rush hour was in full swing. Normally, I would keep my head down, badge in hand, rushing through the turnstiles, praying no one stopped me to ask about Russell. But today I stopped right in the middle of the atrium. The white suit was a beacon. Heads turned. Conversations died. I saw whispers, nudges. I saw phones being pulled out. I stood tall, making eye contact. I nodded to the receptionist, who looked like she was about to faint. Good morning, Kelly, I said, my voice carrying. Gee, good morning, Mrs. Moan. Ms. Evans, she stammered. I saw Arthur Henderson waiting for me by the elevators. My lawyer. He wore a three-piece suit that looked older than the building, carrying a battered leather briefcase that looked like it held the secrets of the universe. He smiled when he saw me, a sharp, predatory smile. You look like death incarnate, he said approvingly. If I'm death, I'm wearing Alexander McQueen, I corrected. Ready, Arthur. I was born ready. I hear Russell is already upstairs. He's trying to lobby the board. He even brought them coffee. Coffee doesn't fill a $3.8 million hole in the ledger, I said. We stepped into the executive elevator, the doors closing to shut out the whispers of the lobby. How do you feel? Arthur asked, watching the floor numbers climb. Terrified, I admitted, and incredibly excited. Good, use it. Russell is going to try to charm them. He'll play the victim. He'll say you're emotional. Don't be emotional, be Data. I am always Data, Arthur. The elevator dinged on the 40th floor, the executive level. The glass doors slid open. The hallway was quiet, but it was a tense quiet. Executive assistants were typing furiously, head down, but I could feel their eyes on me as we walked past. I walked past Russell's office. The door was open, his nameplate, Russell Monroe, Chief Executive Officer, still on the door. I made a mental note to have facilities remove it with a screwdriver within the hour. We reached the boardroom. The double doors were closed. I could hear voices inside, Russell's voice. He was talking fast, talking loud, trying to sell a narrative. A temporary misunderstanding, a domestic dispute. The vision of the company remains strong. I didn't knock. I put my hand on the handle, looked at Arthur, and he nodded. I threw the doors open. The talking stopped instantly. 12 men and women sat around the massive obsidian conference table, and at the head of the table, standing in his usual spot of power, was Russell. He looked better than last night. He had showered, changed into a fresh suit, but his eyes were manic. He froze when he saw me. Meredith, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I was just telling the board that we need to keep personal matters out of the boardroom. Good morning, everyone, I said, my voice steady and carrying, just like I had practiced in the mirror. Apologies for the interruption, but I believe what Russell calls personal matters involves the theft of nearly $4 million of shareholder value. That makes it very much a boardroom matter. Meredith, George, the board chairman, said quietly, Russell says you froze the accounts out of spite. "George, tell her this company is my creation," Russell shouted at George, then swung around to glare at my lawyer. "You stay out of this, Henderson." "An intimate relationship," Arthur Henderson chimed in smoothly from the corner, "violates the HR Code of Conduct, specifically Section 4 on executive relationships and conflict of interest. An engagement ring for your mistress qualifies as an investment," Linda, the representative from our largest venture capital firm, said, her voice cold as ice. "And while you are still married to the majority shareholder." "She wasn't a mistress," Russell pleaded desperately. "Vanessa was the COO. We were building a partnership. Look, okay, maybe I overspent. Maybe I got carried away. I'll pay it back. Deduct it from my bonus. But you can't fire me. I am Nexus. I am the face on those magazine covers. If I leave, the stock drops to zero." "Hello, everyone," I said, stepping forward, taking control of the room. My voice shook slightly at first, but then it anchored. "I'm Meredith. You know me because I'm the one who fixes the systems late at night, but starting today, I am the one who signs the checks." I placed my briefcase on the table. With 2 sharp clicks, I opened the latches. In the dead silence of the room, the sound was deafening. I pulled out the forensic audit and slid it down the center of the long conference table. It spun perfectly, landing right in front of George. Arthur walked the room, handing out thick packets of documents to each board member. A heavy, suffocating silence descended on the boardroom. The only sound was the rustling of paper as 12 board members flipped through the forensic audit. Then, the gasps began. I saw George's face go pale. I saw Linda's jaw tighten as she saw the private jet travel listed as client acquisition. I saw George shake his head as he read about the satellite office apartment. I didn't look at Russell. I walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room, picked up a black marker, and pulled off the cap with a sharp squeak. Facing away from the room, I wrote on the board. "This," I tapped the first number I wrote, a 0, "is the number of lines of code Russell has written. This is the number of strategic product decisions he has made without my approval. This is the number of patents in his name." I turned and wrote another number, $3,800,000. "This is the amount Russell and Vanessa have withdrawn from the company for personal use over the last 5 years. I wrote a third number, $84,700,000. "And this," I pointed to the board, "is the total revenue generated by the Nexus algorithm in the last 7 years. The algorithm I wrote. The patents registered to Meredith Evans." I stared Russell down, tossing the marker onto the table with a loud clack. "Russell has a lot of words," I interrupted as he tried to speak. "But numbers don't lie. They just state the facts, and this audit is the truth." George looked up at Russell, his voice cracking. "Russell, is this true? $45,000 at Tiffany on a corporate card." Russell was pale, sweating. "George, listen to me. It's complicated. The line between personal brand and corporate brand is blurry. I had to maintain an image. The ring was an investment in that image of success." "Rosie, don't do this," he warned, his voice low, a desperate plea. "You destroy me, you destroy the company." "Russell is not the engine of this car," I told the board. "He is the hood ornament, and hood ornaments are expensive, heavy, and very easy to replace." Russell was cornered. He tugged at his collar, his mask slipping entirely. "She's fragile," he spat, glaring at the board. "Meredith can't run this company. She's a back-end coder. She doesn't know how to talk to the press. She has no leadership. You will fail." He turned to me, his eyes spitting venom. "You are a boring woman, Meredith. No one wants a librarian running a tech giant. You will bore the world to death." "You're right, Russell," I said calmly. "I have been invisible by choice." I paused, but not anymore. I stood at the head of the table. "I propose a motion to accept the immediate resignation of Russell Monroe and to terminate Vanessa Thorne for cause. I also propose a motion to name Meredith Evans as interim CEO." "I second the motion," Linda said, closing her folder with a snap. "All in favor?" George asked. Every single hand went up. Even the people Russell had hired himself raised their hands. They knew a sinking ship when they saw one, and they weren't going down with him. "The motion carries," George said. He looked at Russell. "Russell, we accept your resignation. Security will escort you from the premises, Mr. Monroe." Two security guards, large men whose names I had known for years in the lobby, stepped forward. "This way, sir." "What about Vanessa?" he panicked. "What about Vanessa?" "Vanessa has already been removed from the building," I answered coldly. "Her access was revoked at 8 a.m. She's waiting for you on the curb. I suggest you pool your money for a cab. It's cheaper that way." Russell stood there, looking completely stripped of his illusion. He was no longer a titan of industry. He was just a man who couldn't afford the suit he was wearing. He tried to muster one last bit of dignity, shaking off the security guard's hand and straightening his jacket. He gave me one last look of pure hatred, pointing a finger at me, but I didn't even blink. He turned and walked out, the double doors slamming behind him. The room was quiet again, but this time it wasn't a heavy silence. It was a vacuum waiting to be filled. I took a step forward, my red heels clicking against the floor like gunshots. I walked to the end of the table, to the seat Russell had occupied, but I didn't sit down. I pushed the chair aside and stood at the head of the table. I was nervous. These were the people who had watched the live stream. They had watched me walk away like a coward. I looked at their faces. "Now," I said, "let's get back to work. I have a roadmap for the next quarter that doesn't involve trips to St. Bart's, but does involve a 20% increase in processing speeds. Who wants to hear it?" No one spoke. Everyone held their breath. "Also," I continued, "we are restoring the overtime pay that was cut last year and increasing the R&D budget by 200%. Smiles broke out across the room. Real smiles. Then one person began to clap. Dave, the senior developer, then Sarah from HR. Soon the entire room was on its feet. It wasn't polite applause, it was a cheer. That evening, the news of the Nexus shakeup was everywhere. The headlines read, "The Silent Genius Speaks. Nexus Innovations announces leadership restructuring. Meredith Evans, founder and creator of Nexus Tech, takes over as CEO. We thank the previous management for their service and look forward to a new era of transparency and innovation." Our stock went up 15%. Turns out, the market likes stability and genius a lot more than it likes flash and drama. A few months later, the dust settled. Russell signed the repayment agreement. He was forced to liquidate his assets. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he moved back to Ohio, living in his mother Evelyn's basement. It was poetic justice. He now works at a Best Buy selling computers. He often brags to customers about how he used to be a CEO. The customers just smile and ask him where the USB cables are. Vanessa was sued in civil court. To avoid a longer sentence, she pled guilty to the tax evasion charges. She is currently performing community service, picking up trash along the highway. I like to think she is finally cleaning up after herself. As for me, I sold the penthouse. There were too many ghosts. I bought a brownstone in Brooklyn with a garden, a library, and a large kitchen where I cook for friends, real friends, not parasites. I set up a scholarship for women in STEM, named the Evans Grant. Every year, I fund 10 girls through college so they never have to rely on anyone else for their future. I've also started dadding again. His name is Mark, and he's an architect. He doesn't care about my money, he likes my mind. On our first date, he asked me to explain quantum computing. We talked for 4 hours. I am happy. Not the filtered, Instagram happiness I used to pretend to have, but real happiness. The kind that comes from knowing you can walk through fire and come out stronger on the other side. The other night, I was sitting on my living room floor, eating pepperoni pizza and drinking a cheap glass of red wine, looking out at the city skyline. I lost a husband and I lost a best friend. But I got my company back, and I got myself back. Looking at the balance sheet of my life, that is a massive net profit. I learned a valuable lesson. Silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's just the sound of someone loading a weapon. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Recalling it wasn't easy, but telling the truth feels good. If you enjoyed this journey, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot. And let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to cut a toxic person out of your life? I'd love to hear your stories. And remember, if you ever find yourself in a room where people are laughing at you, think of this story. Don't scream, don't argue, just wait. Collect your data, check your contract, and then when they least expect it, flip the switch, keep your receipts. Goodbye.